Once upon a time, in a peaceful suburban neighborhood, there was a woman named Karen. She had long blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and an air of entitlement that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Karen was married to a successful lawyer and had 3 children, whom she loved dearly. But there was something about Karen that the other neighbors found unsettling. She always seemed to have a sneer on her face and a critical comment ready to blurt out. And her behavior towards the neighborhood children was particularly disturbing. One sunny afternoon, a group of black children were playing in the park near Karen's house. They were laughing and having a great time, completely unaware of the danger that lurked nearby. Suddenly, Karen appeared from behind a tree, holding a whip in her hand. "Listen here, you KFC watermelon-eating basketball monkeys," Karen shouted at the children. "You should go back to the fields where you belong, just like in the good old days." The children were shocked and scared, not understanding why this woman was being so mean to them. But before they could even react, Karen began whipping them mercilessly. The children cried out in pain, trying to escape, but Karen was relentless. After she was satisfied with her beating, Karen walked off with a smug smile on her face. "That'll teach those little brats to stay out of my neighborhood," she thought to herself. But little did Karen know, a bystander had captured the entire incident on camera. The video quickly went viral, and the whole neighborhood was in an uproar. Karen's husband, who had no idea about her behavior, was shocked and deeply disappointed. Realizing the consequences of her actions, Karen felt a tinge of guilt but quickly shrugged it off. "They had it coming," she muttered under her breath. Later that night, after her family had gone to bed, Karen sat alone in her living room, sipping on a glass of wine. As she thought about the events of the day, she couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness inside. "I really need to get some dick," Karen said out loud, breaking the eerie silence in the house. She sighed and turned off the TV, before heading to bed. But little did Karen know, her actions had caused her to become a pariah in the neighborhood. No one wanted anything to do with her anymore, and even her own family started to distance themselves. It wasn't until Karen lost everything that she finally realized the gravity of her actions. She was left all alone, with no one to turn to. And as she sat in her empty home, she couldn't help but think to herself, "This is a certified woman moment." From that day on, Karen vowed to change her ways and treat everyone with kindness and respect. She had learned the hard way that her entitled attitude and racism would only bring her isolation and misery. And so, the woman who once whipped black children in the park, now spends her days volunteering at a local community center. Moral of the story: don't be a
like a 14-year-old, but my boobs are huge!
Once upon a time in a land far, far away, there lived a muscular man named Chad. He was known for his brawn and his love for all things macho. But little did anyone know, Chad's deepest secret was that he was a raging homophobe and a racist. One day, Chad heard about a legendary treasure that belonged to a notorious pirate king. The thought of possessing such riches sparked a fire in his heart, and he set out on a journey to find it. As he sailed across the sea, Chad came across a small island inhabited by furries. In his ignorance and bigotry, he scoffed at the sight of them and vowed to stay as far away as possible. But fate had other plans. A vicious storm struck, destroying Chad's ship and leaving him stranded on the island. With no other option, he sought shelter with the furries. As he spent more time with them, Chad realized that they were not so different from him after all. They were kind, loving, and accepting of all, regardless of their appearance or sexual orientation. Slowly, but surely, Chad's heart began to soften and he found himself attracted to one of the male furries named Fluffy. It was a confusing and conflicting feeling for the homophobic Chad, but he couldn't deny his growing desire. With the help of Fluffy, Chad transformed into a furry himself, and it was like a whole new world had opened up to him. He embraced his newfound identity and love for Fluffy, and they set out on an adventure to find the treasure together. On their quest, they faced many obstacles, including angry tribes of creatures and treacherous terrains. But with each trial, Chad learned more about himself and let go of his prejudices. Finally, they arrived at the location of the treasure. But instead of gold and jewels, they found a letter from the Pirate King. It read, "The Real treasure was the journey, not the destination. And it seems like you have found your true self on this adventure." Filled with a newfound understanding and acceptance, Chad and Fluffy returned to the furry island where they lived happily ever after, surrounded by love and diversity. And from that day on, Chad was no longer a muscular, racist, and homophobic man, but a gay furry. The end.
The giant horse conch weighs over 11 pounds.
John was known in his small town as a pervert, constantly watching hardcore gangbang furry hentai on his computer. He spent hours every day satisfying his sick desires, never realizing the consequences of his actions. One day, John's addiction caught up with him. As he was vigorously stroking his cock to a particularly wild scene, he suddenly felt a sharp pain and his vision went blurry. He let out a cry of agony and quickly pulled his hand away from his throbbing member. Blood was dripping from it and he knew he had to seek medical help. Panicked and embarrassed, John rushed to the nearest hospital. The doctor examined him and informed him that he had injured his penis due to excessive masturbation. John was horrified, but the doctor continued to explain that his addiction to violent and non-consensual hentai had led to this unfortunate event. Feeling ashamed and desperate to find a solution, John asked the doctor what he could do. The doctor explained that he needed to change his behavior and stop watching such disturbing content. John was skeptical, but the doctor convinced him that it was for his own good. Feeling defeated, John left the hospital with a newfound realization. He had let his perverted desires consume him and it had caused harm to himself. He realized that he needed to change his ways and become a better person. From that day on, John stopped watching hardcore gangbang furry hentai and instead discovered a new interest in innocent and cute lowly hentai. He found joy in the sweet and pure love displayed in these stories. He also began volunteering at local charities and spreading positivity in his community. Years later, John looked back on that fateful day at the hospital and was thankful for the wake-up call. He had learned a valuable lesson and transformed into a better person. No longer a pervert, he was now known as a kind and compassionate member of his community.
Yeah.